Welcome to the 2015 Royal Tyrrell Museum Speaker Series. Today, the Royal Tyrrell Museum and its cooperating society are proud to present Dr. Lorna O'Brien. Lorna grew up on a dairy farm in the Midlands of Ireland. She obtained her bachelor's degree in geology from the University College Dublin in Ireland. After completing her bachelor's degree, she moved to England to pursue her PhD in paleontology, master's degree at the Department of Geology at the University of Bristol. For her master's thesis, she studied arthropod escape traces preserved in Jurassic deposits from England. Her interest in evolution of early life then led Lorna to Canada, where she pursued a PhD at the University of Toronto in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. For her dissertation, she investigated the paleoecology of a new Burgess shale site called the Tulip Beds, located on Mount Stephen. Over the past years, Lorna has done fieldwork in Ireland, the UK, Spain, British Columbia, and Alberta. Today, Lorna will present some of the highlights of what the preparation lab here at the museum has been working on over the last year in a talk titled, Through the Looking Glass, A Year in the Life of the Preparation Lab. So without further delay, here's Dr. Lorna O'Brien.
Thank you. So as you can see, it's a pretty big jump that I have made from Burgess shale to dinosaur preparation. But today I want to just introduce you to the preparation lab. So we are the people who are part of an interactive exhibit in the museum. So when you walk around the galleries and you see the window, you can actually see into our workspace. This is the large lab. This is where the majority of us spend most of our time. But today I'm going to be presenting some of the work that the Prep Lab has done in the last 12 months. I have a disclaimer, the majority of this work is not my own. I'm presenting other people's work. So I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And just a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to cover everything that we do in terms of preparation techniques. I just want to highlight some of the areas that we've been working on this year. So first of all, I will cover what is a preparator, for those of you who are not sure what our actual job entails. And what are the essential competencies of a preparator? What are we expected to know? Our role within the museum. Who is part of our team at the moment and has been for the past year. What projects we've been working on the lab, in the lab for the last 12 months. What fieldwork we did last summer and into the fall. And some of the projects we've been involved with in the gallery and some of the outreach and media things that we've been involved in. Just to point out that I was told by some of the other staff that if you're going to throw up slides that have only text on them, the least you could do is throw in a cat. So for the text ones, I have some cats. As you can see, I went with cats with a dinosaur theme, okay? So what is a preparator? We are essentially the people that make a jacket that looks like this turn into something like this. So this is the nasal horn core of a ceratopsian dinosaur. And as you can see, the scientific value in the jacket is very little. But now that this horn has been prepared, a researcher can actually take measurements from this horn and it is useful for a scientific research study. The Society of Vertebrate Paleontology has defined a preparator as an individual with specialized skills, knowledge, training, and expertise that qualifies them to prepare vertebrate fossils for scientific research and education. And this is the last big text slide that we have, but just to say what some of our competencies are supposed to be. We are expected to be critical thinkers, to have an aptitude for fossils as material, actually understand what the fossils are used for, to understand fossils as biological materials and data, to understand fossils as geological materials and data. So this is also not only understanding what the fossil is in terms of the animal it represented, but also having an understanding for the geological information that should go along with that fossil and why it's important to research. An aptitude in the use and preparation, in the use of preparation tools and techniques. So this is something that we're always trying to improve on. There are always new techniques coming out for preparation, and the preparators do attend conferences and try to educate themselves as much as possible. We also read papers to make sure that we're up to date on current techniques being used. We need to have a good understanding of the use of adhesives, the conservation principles and ethics that are involved with preparing specimens, the use of molding and casting materials and techniques. Preparation, we're also expected to participate in the science of paleontology. So some of what we do directly relates to the science of the fossils. So we actually help out in terms of the research, making sure that we collect information as we go along during the preparation process. That also feeds into documentation and record keeping. So this feeds into what the collection staff do, but everything that we do to a fossil, we want to record that. Also, where we collect the fossil while doing fieldwork. This is important when researchers come to the museum and want to know more about the fossil. We have everything in the collections database, and people expect to be able to get this knowledge from us. We need to also have an understanding of archival labeling, housing and storage, and the ethics and use of specimens, as well as understanding fieldwork. And a lot of what we do during the summer months is fieldwork. So our role within the museum, specifically as it relates to fossils, we are collecting them, preparing them, conserving them, and collecting the associated data. We are also involved in the installation and upkeep of the exhibits that you see in the galleries. We have an education role, including the gallery preparation table in the summer and some other behind-the-scenes tours that we do with people when they come to see what we do and what work is going on. Also providing casts to researchers and institutions. This is an important role of the casting shop. So the team, who are we? I calculated that over the past year, about 17 technicians have cycled through the lab. Not all at once, but we have various technicians who work on macro preparation. That's the preparation of the large fossils, so things like dinosaurs, the marine reptiles. We have micro preparators. They are people who are working on really small detailed material, so like the fish and the mammals. We have microfossil collection going on, and that's actually pulling fossil material out of sorted matrix, and molding and casting. And this year, 2 of our technicians moved to the flood mitigation crew, and I'll explain a little bit about what they've been doing. And as well as the 17 technicians, we also have numerous volunteers who have been coming into the lab over the past 12 months. This is a photograph that was taken of a contingent of the tech staff that went to a conference in Utah. So this is an annual preparation conference that the staff try to get to every year. So I'm going to introduce just a little bit about what we've been working on in the lab in the past 12 months. And the first person I'm going to introduce is Mark. As everyone knows, Mark is a very patient man. He has been in the museum for over 19 years now. He specifically is working on one of the most famous dinosaurs that we have in the preparation lab at the moment. This is the Suncor ankylosaur. This is an image that was taken earlier this week, so you can see how much work has actually been done. So this is the most complete it has been so far in photographed. This ankylosaur is important for numerous reasons. First of all, I should point out it is a nodosaur. Okay, so it doesn't have the tail club. It is a specimen that is probably one of the oldest dinosaurs in Alberta. It has 3-dimensional exceptional preservation. So I threw in the cast specimen that we have in the gallery to show you what a typical ankylosaur specimen would look like. This is also not from one individual. Generally, we find just isolated scutes and parts of bones. It is incredibly rare that we find a dinosaur as complete as the one that Mark is currently working on. If you can see from the interpretation drawing here, normally there's a huge leap between what we have as a skeleton and what the dinosaur would actually have looked like in real life. You can see that the leap from what Mark is currently working on is not that big to make to an actual reconstruction. It looks exactly like it would have in life. It essentially looks like it fell asleep and got turned to stone. And this fossil is spectacular because of the skin, scale, scutes, everything that it has preserved. And this is going to be really valuable scientific information as we go forward. Especially, it's also going to make a great gallery piece. Mark has been working on this specimen for 4 years. He probably has another 2 years to go before this is completely finished. When Mark has not been working on the ankylosaur, he's been doing a couple of other projects in the lab. One of them includes the mapping of bone elements. This is a jacket that I've been working on. It is a large skull element in the base of this jacket. I haven't actually gotten to that part of it yet. As I've been working through the matrix, I found lots of other bones. And because this is part of a larger bone bed mapping project, Mark has had to map those bones as we've gone along and uncovered them. So Donna's the second person I'm going to introduce. Donna has been at the museum for 12 years now. She is currently working on another spectacular piece that is front and center in the window. This is the Okotoks scar block. This, again, is 3-dimensional preservation. And I don't want people to get confused. It's very rare that we find fossils like this. It just so happens that we have two spectacular pieces in the lab at one time. You can see that what we are getting preserved here is the three-dimensional fish with, they are preserved upside down. So you're actually looking into the back of the jaw of these fish. And the bottom picture here shows what the block looked like before Donna started on this a couple of years ago. There was only a couple of fish actually poking out at the top. You can see some of the images of the progress that she has made. 23 fish have been found in this block. 21 are complete and in situ. And when this is finished in about 2 years' time, this will also make a great display specimen. Another project that Donna was working on in the past year is the Mannyberry's Troodon nest. This is a nest of about 9 eggs. It's not the most spectacular nest, but it is still impressive by the number of eggs that are preserved. And what I also think is spectacular is the fact that Donna was able to prepare this at all, because the sediment around these eggs is incredibly difficult to deal with. It's incredibly soft. So this made a nice project last year. Darren, probably most of you know Darren. Darren has been around for longer than the museum. He has been working in paleontology since 1980 when he started working as a preparator for Phil Curry. He is currently working on the Spirit River hadrosaur. This is an image of the progress that has been made. This is looking at the back of the skull of this hadrosaur. It doesn't look like much at the moment. Darren's really only in the infancy of this project. But some of the work that happened to these blocks this year was very interesting. The Spirit River hadrosaur was collected a couple of years ago when an industrial crew found it putting in a gas line. And as you can see, there are huge blocks of material that had to be removed that have this skeleton in them. But only parts of the blocks we actually want to keep, and a lot of the matrix has to be removed. Darren was trying to do this by hand. It was essentially coming to nothing. The rock is way too hard to try and do this. So Can West, a concrete cutting company, actually came in, spent 2 days with us in the lab and cut these blocks down much smaller. And that's what Darren has now started to prepare. So the way that they do this concrete cutting is essentially it's a diamond encrusted steel rope that is put around the block. It is put onto this series of pulleys to create tension, and then the rope is rotated and actually moves through the rock. And as it moves through the rock, the pulleys are extended so that the tension is maintained. And you can actually cut huge, huge pieces of rock at a time. So this was a spectacular project that happened late last year. This is David. David has been in the preparation lab for the last 10 years. He primarily works on bone bed material, specifically bone bed 30 from Dinosaur Provincial Park. Just to briefly explain what is a bone bed, this is when you have isolated elements of dinosaurs that have all died and been buried together, but they're not found in their original skeletal positions. So as you can see from the map that he's made above, each of the colors is representative of a particular type of element of this horned dinosaur. So we find them scattered all over the place. So when we're collecting from bone beds, we want to make sure that we're mapping them correctly. And that's what David has been doing here at Bone Bed 30. This is Marilyn. Marilyn is our casting and molding expert. She has been at the museum on and off for 33 years. I don't have too many images of some of the stuff that Marilyn has worked on because we've had such a high rate of material being pumped through the casting shop. But one of the things that was done late last year was the making of a mold of a Daspletosaur femur that we have at the museum here. So this is a type of Tyrannosaur. Two of the more spectacular pieces that Marilyn is currently working on are the skull reconstructions of two of the horned dinosaurs. Coronosaurus is only known from bone bed material, so only known from isolated pieces. So Marilyn is essentially putting all those pieces together to make a skull as it would have looked in life. This is a really time-consuming project, and both of these skulls are near completion right now. The Alberta Ceratops is known from a more complete skull, but it is deformed. So during the process of making the skull, Marilyn is able to undeform this skull so that we can actually see what it would have looked like. These two skulls will make up part of our collections. These will be great additions so that people will be able to see what the skulls would have looked like in real life. And also they are on order for use at the new Grand Prairie Museum. And that is another project that Marilyn was involved with this year. and that is the making of the Pachyrhinosaurus bone bed that will be a feature exhibit at the Phil Curry Museum in Grand Prairie. This was a huge undertaking. This was the production of 211 cast bones. Each of the bones are here mapped out as they are going to appear in the Grand Prairie exhibit. This is based on the Pipestone Creek bone bed. This is a bone bed close to Grand Prairie. So basically going to reconstruct what the bone bed looked like from the maps. This is Robin. She is the preparator at Grand Prairie. She came and spent a week here learning from Marilyn. As well as Robin, I was involved in this project, and Kendra from Education was also pulled in for this project. This was a huge undertaking, and these casts took a long time, but when this exhibit goes in, it will be spectacular. And just to mention, some of the other people that worked in the large lab during the year included the summer staff. So this is Amanda, top left. She is now the collections manager in Cleveland Museum. Emma is an undergraduate student. Mark on the right is a former paleontology student from Ontario. And Tom on the bottom is currently studying for a master's in the University of Toronto. And I was also part of the summer staff crew this year. So for the summer staff, we tend not to work on big projects, partially because generally the summer staff are not contracted long enough to see a big project through. But also, we want to have material that's suitable to go on the preparation table. So we want something that's small that people will be able to see results in while they're actually standing at the prep table. This is an example of some of the material we were working on. This is part of Dr. Caleb Brown's research program, looking at horned ceratopsians. So most of this material is skull elements, display structures of these horned dinosaurs that he's interested in. In total, for this collection, we did over 30 ceratopsian skull elements from unprepared storage. This ranged from material that was collected in 1965 right up to 2014. And this material came from all over southern Alberta. So there's just two that I want to highlight here. The first is the top one, which is the base of a horn core. This one, I was actually prepping it, opened it up, realized that there was a very clean break, and we didn't have the rest of the horn. It's very unusual that you would collect the base of a horn without collecting the rest of it. Sometimes it happens the other way, that the top of the horn is collected, but not the base. So I had a look around collections, and sure enough, found the part that went on top of this. It had been prepared about 30 years ago. So this made for a really neat story that I was able to put them back together 30 years later, and now these are actually scientifically useful because you can get complete measurements from this piece. Another piece that was prepared by one of the preparators during the summer is the Tabor horn core that you see on the bottom corner here. It doesn't look like much, but this is scientifically valuable, as it is the orbital horn, so the horn that goes over the eyebrow of one of these ceratopsian dinosaurs, and it has never been found in this locality or package of rocks before. So this will be part of a study that Caleb will do in the future. Other bone bed material we worked on during the summer is Francois' bone bed material from Tolman Bridge. As you can see, there's a much more diverse range in the material that we were prepping. This includes all body parts of this Ouranoceratops dinosaur, another horned dinosaur. In total, we prepared 35 of the specimens collected in 2013, and to date, 113 of the specimens collected in 2014 are already prepared and in collections. We didn't just work on dinosaurs. This is a project Amanda was doing, putting together the tail of this marine reptile, a mosasaur. The picture on the left shows the project about halfway through. So when she initially started, it was basically bags of bits. She glued them all back together, and you can see on the right that we have a relatively complete tail. The rest of this marine reptile had already been prepared, so the whole thing is complete now. So this finishes this project. And just a note to say that Emma, our undergrad summer preparator, she was also working on a 3D scanning project, not on this particular dinosaur, but on a new dinosaur that will be described later this year. And one of the advantages to 3D scanning something is that you can use software to retro-deform it. So the skull that she was looking at has been squished during preservation, and she, using software, will be able to undeform it back to how it would have looked in real life. So I'm going to move now from the large lab into the small lab, so where we do more of the micro preparation. This is Allison. She's been at the museum for 12 years. She works specifically on fish from Pisces Point. This was a locality in Dry Island Buffalo Jump that Dr. Mike Newbury, who was a former postdoc here, worked on. This project has been ongoing for 6 or 7 years, and Allison has been working on preparing the fish from this. And you can see from the image at the bottom, which is one of the fish she prepared late last year, that they're very, very small, very delicate, and require a huge amount of skill in order to prepare them. So there should be some exciting stuff coming from Pisces Point material in the near future. Joe has been at the museum since 2006 when he started as a geo. He is full-time in the preparation lab since 2010. He currently works as a preparator for Dr. Craig Scott, working on mammals. Here's a selection of some of the mammals that he's worked on. As you can see, again, looking at the scale bars, these are really tiny elements. So a great deal of skill under the microscope is required to prepare these. And Joe has also moved to the flood mitigation crew, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a bit. Some other people involved in work in the prep lab include Corey, who works on microfossils. He likes to dig really big holes and take lots of bags of sediment out. This is an example of a section that he took in Saskatchewan. Often when we are trying to get a clear look at a rock sequence in the Badlands, it can be overshadowed by all of the erosion that's going on around it. So this is an example of a trench that he had to make in order to see the rock underneath it in place. On the top right-hand side are some of the bags of matrix that he removed, and on the bottom you can see the screen washing process. This is essentially a process of trying to filter out the larger particles from the matrix in order to find fossils. So essentially what you're left with is something that looks like a very coarse sand, and then it has to get prepared out. So Patty, as well as Corey, does some microfossil sorting. And the type of material that Patty would be looking for are these kinds of things, so teeth, scales, small pieces of vertebrae, basically fish, turtles, lots of different kinds of reptiles. So these are really important fossils because they can tell us a huge amount about a community, whereas we don't normally see that with just one individual specimen. So these are really good for community studies, and we can find these in lots of places where you wouldn't normally find large remains preserved. And also to mention, Jim is our head technician. He is essentially the prep lab manager, and he has been around for the last 34 years. He essentially is responsible for the day-to-day running of the lab. So in terms of preparation, he has got to do very little in the past year. But some of the projects that he has been involved with are some of the work that we do in the gallery. So this is an example of Jim vacuuming the back of the T-Rex. And this is something that we do annually in the galleries, is actually clean the specimens, make sure that they're maintained, and fix anything that needs to be, that has come loose over the course of the year. And he was also responsible for supervising Kyle. This is a visiting preparator from the Canterbury Museum. He arrived in October 2014. This is him at the Leptoceratops site that Francois introduced last week. And he was super excited to get to do lots of fieldwork while he was here. He didn't expect to do that. But the primary reason he was here was to learn preparation techniques from Jim. So he job shadowed Jim for about 3 weeks. And the reason that he came the whole way from New Zealand to here is that he is the only preparator in his museum. The previous preparator had retired. He is also one of the only preparators in the entirety of New Zealand. So that's how he ended up coming to Canada. And he brought with him 2 types of fossils that we very rarely see in a museum like this that's dominated by dinosaurs. He brought this beautiful rib cage of a fossil penguin. He also brought part of the skull of a dolphin. And they were really neat to see. Also to mention some staff changes that have happened over the last 12 months. So Becky is a longtime member of the prep lab. She jumped ship earlier last year and moved to collections. Chris on the bottom here, he was in the prep lab for the last couple of years. He moved to Newcastle in the UK to pursue a Museum Studies Masters. And Ben on the right-hand side was part of the preparation team. He left, but very quickly came back and is now part of the flood mitigation team. And I also need to mention some of the many volunteers that volunteer in the prep lab. So Jane, up here, top left, is also sorting microvertebrate material. She is a longtime volunteer. We have Jay, Rosemary, Judy, Gail, and Graham, who are all part of the team that work on some of the larger specimens in the prep lab, mostly bone bed material. We have lots of other volunteers that I didn't have photographs for, but we are very grateful to all volunteers who come in and spend their time in the lab. We also had over 30 field volunteers this year. So without the time that the field volunteers put in, we wouldn't be able to collect nearly as much material. At Dinosaur Provincial Park alone, we had over 1,000 volunteer hours put in. So this is a huge help to us. Just to highlight some of the volunteers, up top we have some graduate students who came and helped out at Dinosaur Provincial Park. On the right top, we have Ramon, who was a former preparator here at the museum, is now studying for his master's at the University of Calgary. On the bottom left, we have Kirsten Brink. She was a former geo and prep lab staff here at the museum. She is now finishing up her PhD at the University of Toronto. And on the right-hand side at the bottom, we have some of the summer camp leaders who came out and dug up a lot of matrix and helped out at Tolman Bridge Bone Bed. And then this is moving forward to some of the gallery projects that we've been involved in. The first is the facelift that Black Beauty got early last year. This is Mark actually covering the leg of Black Beauty in tinfoil. Basically, the background was repainted. A company came in and did it, but in order to do that, the whole skeleton had to be covered. And also you can see in this image here where it's completely covered except for the feet. Parts of the bones on the feet were actually rearranged so that it looked a little bit better. And you can see in the finished product that it's looking spectacular in the gallery today. Another project that happened was the installation of the sauropod footprints underneath the Camarasaurus in Dinosaur Hall. This was a project that was, it was cast by Marilyn. Jim made it look like rock and painted it up, and then Mark actually installed it into the landform in the gallery. So this is a really nice addition to this area in the gallery, so it actually shows what sauropod footprints would have looked like and the huge size that some of these sauropods were. And also some fossils have been cycled through the prep lab at the moment that are going to go into the Fossils in Focus gallery that opens in May 2015. And these are specimens that were previously prepared but have come back in basically to get a little bit of a facelift before they go on display. And this is an exhibit that is part of an interpretive trail that's being installed at Devil's Coulee. This is the dinosaur egg site that Francois spoke about last week. And this is some of the work that Joe has been doing, actually learning how to put these things together. So moving on to some of the fieldwork we were involved with in the past year. As I mentioned before, we were working on some of the Tolman Bridge bone bed material in the lab. This is the site as it was found. It was found initially in 2012. In 2013, it first started excavation. You can see Becky and Marilyn here before the quarry was really opened up. This is an Rhinoceratops bone bed, so again, another one of these horned dinosaurs. And last summer, we removed over 163 bones from this locality. And it's also part of a larger mapping project that Francois is doing. So one of the interesting things that we have found from the bone bed this summer was this beautiful juvenile orbital horn. This is one of the best that we have actually seen preserved anywhere before, especially of a Rhinoceratops. So this was a really exciting find. And you can see the progress that's been made in 2014. Mark has dug himself a nice big hole. He's also made some nice big jackets. And generally, when we're working in a bone bed, we like to get small material that we can jacket, put in our backpack, and carry out at the end of the day. As you can see, even though Mark can carry a lot of weight, he wouldn't be able to carry one of these out of the field. So instead, all the material from 2013 and 2014 that was too big to be carried out of the Badlands, it's quite a hike up out of the Badlands, this material was helicoptered out in late 2014. So all the jackets are put together in helicopter nets, and you can see Howie and Tom getting them at the other end, putting them onto a flat deck truck in order to bring them back to the museum. So this is one of many ways that we have to try and remove larger jackets from the field. Moving on to Dinosaur Provincial Park, this is work that Dr. Dave Eberth and Dr. Caleb Brown have been doing. They excavated 2 bone beds this summer, the Styracosaurus bone bed 42 and the Centrosaurus bone bed 180. In total, they mapped 451 bones. They collected 336 of those. And the mapping was done by a new technique using 3D GPS mapping. And they also used drones. So this is just a sample of some of the work that happened at DPP this summer. As you can see, again, they made some jackets that were not, you couldn't carry out in a backpack. But a lot of them were smaller pieces and have actually already been through the lab and been prepared. And this is Caleb on the bottom right with his haul of material, some of them when he brought them back. So as you can see, most are small pieces. Up on the top right-hand corner, you can see the preparation lab at DPP. This is a field station of the Tyrrell Museum. So because Dinosaur Park is not done by day trips, people actually go out for 10 days at a time. They stay at the trailers in Dinosaur Park. On the occasional rain days, the staff are able to go into the preparation lab in DPP and actually continue working there. So in the case of Dinosaur Park, again, they ran into the trouble of actually trying to carry some of the material out. You can see in the top, with one of the localities that was close to a road, they were able to make a makeshift stretcher to carry this block out. It took 4 people, and it was a pretty straightforward project to be able to get it into a car. But with the bottom piece, it was a bone bed that was much closer to the river. They didn't want to have to do that big hike out. So instead, the park staff actually lent their boat. So they were able to transport it in a boat back to the field station, which is close to the level where you can actually park a car. Here is some of the new technology that was used at the bone beds this year. This is Kentaro Chiba. He is a PhD student at the University of Toronto who volunteered his time last summer. He's working in the 3D GPS. I'm not going to talk about how they did this, but some of the technicians did learn how to use this, and hopefully this year going forward, we'll learn a little bit more about it. And also the drones were used in getting photographs of the quarry sites. The media were very, very excited about the drones. I don't know if you saw any of the stories, but there's something about drones that I think it brings out the little boy in everyone, and they want to all play with a helicopter. Some of the other work that we did, this was a collection that Darren and I did in November of last year. This is at Rycroft, close to where the Spirit River hadrosaur was collected that Darren is currently working on. This material was found, reported to us at an industrial site. This is a gas site. As you can see, it's a huge pad. It's about 100 meters by 100 meters. The snow was on the ground before we actually got notification that they had found this material, so we weren't able to look around to actually see if we could find any of the rest of it. It is a hadrosaur tail, so it's quite clearly a chunk of tail, but we don't know where it's from at this locality, and we're not sure that we're going to be able to find the rest of it. And again, another example of something that we couldn't carry by ourselves. So in this case, because we were on an industrial site, they were able to load it up for us. The Brazu Dam trackway was discovered in 2013 after the major flooding event. This is something that Dr. Don Henderson was involved with and has actually got a paper in press about this. We went out and actually mapped the trackway. As you can see, it's quite distinctive little marks along the surface of this rock. Generally, when we see something like this, you automatically jump to the conclusion that it must have been a dinosaur because these are pretty big footprints. But this is from a package of rocks that is after the dinosaurs had gone extinct. So we know that it can't have been a dinosaur. So one of the possible trace makers include a pantodont. This is an extinct mammal. This is an example at top right of the pantodont that we have in the gallery. And on the bottom right is an example of the same pantodont. Our cast material has actually gone to a museum in France. And they've mounted it slightly differently, so you can actually see this pantodont, how it would have been in life. And probably this is the only mammal that's actually large enough to be able to make this trackway that Dr. Henderson has been describing. So Catcut Creek mosasaur, this is something that Takuya, one of our former postdocs, was working on. We got a report in that someone had found some skull material. This was a member of the public that called it in. A crew went out, had a look. Unfortunately, they weren't able to find where the material had come from. The bank had collapsed in the meantime, and also the rock type that the skull is in is not similar to any of the rock around the area where the member of the public found it. So in this case, it had probably been transported downstream. So Amanda prepared the skull, the parts that we have last summer. So it is prepared, but unfortunately we won't be able to find the rest of this reptile. So moving on to the flood mitigation project. This was a project that was instigated after the 2013 flooding in response to the amount of localities that might have been disrupted during the flooding. And also with reports that new material was also being discovered as a result of the flooding. So Joe and Ben have spent the past summer and will hopefully spend this summer working on this project. They have found over 100 localities so far with fossil remains. They've worked 8 different river systems, and to date have found 10 different bone beds, over 20 sites with shelly material. They've found trace fossils, so like the theropod trackway here on the right, and also plant localities like the leaf fossil found above. This is one of the projects that made the headlines last year. This is the Castle River hadrosaur. Everyone got very excited. Fishermen found this giant pebble in the Castle River, reported it to the museum thinking that it might be a fossil. They were correct. You can see Ben up here using this makeshift reverse periscope that Warren was able to construct for them out of perspex. And that's because most of the fossil was actually underwater. So they wanted to figure out first if the fossil was something important before spending a lot of money getting a helicopter to bring the material out. So they determined that yes, it was definitely part of the skull of a hadrosaur, one of the duckbill dinosaurs. And you can see them trying to move it around in the river. It wasn't very easy to move. But eventually they were able to get this into the net for a helicopter to do a lift and is now at the museum and should hopefully be going on display soon. Another project that Ben and Joe have been involved in is the Fort Macleod Leptoceratops. Francois spoke a little bit about this one last week. This is a small horned ceratopsian, and it was, again, uncovered by the 2013 flood. In 2014, in October, they went out, had a look at the locality from where it was found, were able to find exactly where the material that we have in the museum came from. Also find a few more bone pieces. Unfortunately, as Francois mentioned last week, we haven't been able to find the top of the skull yet. But as you can see, Ben is quite determined to find it, even if it means donning a wetsuit and getting into the water. So hopefully this year, when the water is a bit clearer and at a nicer temperature, Ben will be able to go back and find the rest of it. But some of the pieces that were found last year, so you can see the progress that has been made on the specimen on the right. Some of the pieces we found last summer were able to connect the parts of the skull that we do have to the main body. And this is really important. So hopefully this project will be fully prepared by this time next year. So some of the other things that we were involved with over the course of the summer was manning of the prep table. If you don't know where the prep table is, we are essentially that small dark corner just before you get to the prep lab window. During the summer, we speak with thousands of people every week. They ask us questions about what we're preparing. We bring out actual specimens, use the actual techniques that we would in the prep lab, and we can interact with the visitors in a way that they very rarely get to do when they visit a museum. We get some really good questions at the prep table, and sometimes we are actually making exciting discoveries as people are at the prep table. So this is a really nice way to be able to interact with the public. We also recently were part of the new behind the scenes video shoot. This is going to be a video that will be shown in the auditorium that will basically tell the life of the fossil after it's been collected and how it gets processed through the museum. So through unprepared, through the preparation process into collections, and for a researcher to come look at it. So this was really neat. We've just seen the final version of this and it looks really good. Other things, the preparators are often shoved in front of the cameras when it comes to showing what kind of work that we do, and also people really like to see how the process actually works. This is Donna and Marilyn at Devil's Coulee when Francois had a huge media blitz. As you can see, lots of photographers and media outlets came, and it made the news all over southern Alberta. So this was a really exciting project. Likewise, at Dinosaur Provincial Park, they had a documentary crew come out and shoot a Born to Explore episode in Dinosaur Provincial Park. They were doing an episode about Alberta. The technicians and what they were doing were featured in this documentary. Another project that we were involved with, this was a very unusual one. This was a request for a cast. This is a champsosaur, a type of crocodile-like animal. As you can see, this is the cast actually in the process of being made, so gluing the sand to it and also painting it up. This was eventually used in a heart medication advert, and I don't know if anyone has seen this advert running on TV. There's also, basically what it is this medication can apparently make a paleontologist be a better paleontologist, so you want to go out and dig up more dinosaurs. Of course, they didn't actually show any dinosaurs, but you know. Some other projects that, outreach projects that we have been involved with include the 150th celebrations in PEI last summer for the Canadian Confederation. They had Alberta Week going on. Marilyn and Chris went out representing the museum, brought out some cast specimens, did some Q&As, interacted with the public, were able to speak all about the museum. These same specimens are now on exhibit at Telespark, and this is part of an exhibit that they have ongoing, and we have also been providing preparators to do weekend meet and greets with the preparators, similar to what we have on our preparation table here during the summers. I also want to mention Jim's retirement. As most of the staff here know, Jim is retiring after 34 years at the museum. He is not currently here. He is using up his holidays before he actually finishes at the end of this month. Jim is going to be a huge loss to the prep lab, but hopefully he's still going to come back and visit us, and hopefully maybe keep doing some preparation. But for the most part, probably Jim is going to spend most of his summer out fishing. And then moving on to what our plans are for the future year. We have ongoing projects in the lab, like most of the ones I discussed today. Hopefully they will be close to completion by this time next year. We're also working on new bone bed material that we collected last summer and we'll collect this year. There are some new galleries that are in the works, so we will be a part of some of the preparation and installation for these galleries. The hiring of the new summer staff has already happened. We will be getting a prep table remodel hopefully at the end of this year. So the prep table will be coming back in 2016, looking nice and fresh. We will be doing some field work, looking at new localities that were found last year, also going out and prospecting for some new material. We have ongoing bone bed sites, including Dinosaur Provincial Park and the Tolman Bridge bone bed that we'll hopefully do some work on this year. And we never know in terms of industrial calls and reports from the public about what might turn up. So cross your fingers that something exciting does get reported to us. And just to finish, I want to say thanks to all the members of the Prep Lab, collections, and researchers who provided information and photographs for this talk. Also to Sue, Alex, and Mike for a lot of the social media photographs that I shamelessly stole for the talk. And just to mention that a lot of our ongoing projects can be seen on the Tyrrell Museum Facebook page, as well as on Twitter at Royal Tyrrell. And if you follow the hashtag Fossil Friday or hashtag Live from the Field, you'll be able to see a lot of the work that we're doing throughout the year. So thank you very much.